Welcome to the hero's journey.
As a podcast editor, I know what it's like for long nights and sitting at the computer and your eyes just start to go down, you're nodding out, trying your best to finish your workload. You can slam down a bunch of monsters and Red Bull and slowly kill yourself. Or you can go with God's nectar. Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company. They're a proud sponsor of the show. Check those guys out. Many times I drink me some of that Flightline Joe. Perks me up, man, gets me going. Without all the jitters, helps me power through projects. So help support the show, help support a brother in Christ and a small business owner with Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company. All right, welcome back to another episode, guys, of the Prometheus Lens podcast. Today we got a real good guest for you. We have author and researcher and pastor. He authored the Q&A of Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, Giants, Sons of the Gods, Angel of the Lord, and Conspiracy Theory, just to name a few. Today we have with us Doug Van Dorn. Doug, thank you for coming along and talking to us today.
Yeah, you're welcome, Justin.
Well, one thing, we talked to you on the Dig Bible podcast back in December of last year about the Angel of the Lord, and you just blew mine and Stephen and Ben's mind on that one several times. That was a really great episode. I enjoyed that thoroughly. But today I want to talk to you about the taboo of conspiracy theory. And especially nowadays where most people struggle and don't believe the narrative, and we can't trust the news. And so this, I think, is a really relevant topic. So what inspired you? You know, I know this book's been out a few years, but what inspired you to write this book and motivation?
Well, I had been wanting to write it for several years, actually, and I had tried to write it for several years. And every time I went down to the computer, like nothing came out of me. It was so weird. I've never really had that problem, and I did with this book. So 2020 March came around, and it was just super strange, and I thought, well, maybe I could try and start writing something since everything in the world closed down, and I had the book written within a week, and then published within the month.
Yeah, during that time we had lots of time to get little projects done. Mine was painting and remodeling.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess with the, everybody has their own definition of conspiracy or conspiracy theory, and in your view, define conspiracy and conspiracy theory for us.
Well, so you've got two words there, right? We can talk about the conspiracy theory of the phrase conspiracy theory maybe a little bit later, but a conspiracy is just a plot that's usually done in secret with two or more people to do something to somebody else. You can have really small conspiracies. You can have super incredible, complicated, powerful conspiracies. You can have conspiracies that take place in your house with like a mom who really favors one kid over the others, and so she conspires against the other kids or something. You can have conspiracies happen in your church. You can see them happen in your work. You can see them happen with the kids on the playground when they conspire against each other, picking teams or something. So a conspiracy is just something that it's bizarre to me that I think a lot of people don't even think that they happen. Maybe it's just because the word conspiracy theory has been thrown out there so much that they don't stop to think that conspiracies are real, and they're very, very common things. And so then, a theory would just be somebody's explanation of some event, whatever level it is, that they think something is a little bit off. And so they think maybe somebody's conspiring against them or against, whatever the object might be. So put together, there's nothing really strange about either one of those words. And it really shouldn't have never become something that it has become today to talk about conspiracy theory. I wonder in the last 3 years if people's opinion of that phrase hasn't changed along with their view of the media and everything else. I don't know the answer to that, but I think people are more willing to talk about conspiracy theories than they were just a couple of years ago, which I view as a good thing.
Oh, definitely. I think that's a word that's often used to shut down different ideas and different talking points, and I think to entertain different ideas and stuff is just it's it's very important for critical thinking and for someone to form their own ideas and postulations instead of just being believing what you've been spoon fed on certain subjects. And we have a tendency as a people to be very lazy, and just believe what we're told and not look into things ourselves. But like you said, in the past
I,
few years,
I
I've seen that change.
have you?
I mean, honestly, or in the very least, they're seeking,
Yeah.
in the communities and stuff that I've been in. With your book and one conspiracy theory that popped in my head, and I've heard others, like Derek Gilbert mention it, was, in the Bible was Psalms 2:1. It says the kings of the earth prepare for battle and the rulers plot together against the Lord and against his anointed. And you touch on that in your book about there's plenty of conspiracies in the Bible and just people don't look at it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first time that the word is used is, I think it's with the Joseph story. The brothers conspire against their little brother to, first they want to kill him, and then the oldest brother says, no, let's not kill him, let's throw him in this well and sell him into slavery. But that's a conspiracy. You had all these guys do this secret thing to this unsuspecting person, um, that he had no idea was coming. That's a conspiracy. And the very first conspiracy goes back to the Garden of Eden, where the serpent is conspiring against the woman to get her to sin, um, against God's command. I don't know how anybody could think of that as not a conspiracy. That's that's the definition of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Some of the things we talk about, with the whole giant thing, the Nephilim thing, the sons of God thing. Genesis 6 was a conspiracy of watchers or angels to come down and do something they weren't supposed to do, according to the laws of heaven, and take our women and have the Nephilim be born from that. It's a conspiracy. So conspiracies are everywhere, and the greatest conspiracies, obviously, what the nations, the individuals, the peoples did to the Messiah when he came, after his 3.5 years of ministry. The Pharisees had been conspiring against him for years, because of the things that he was doing, making them look so bad, constantly, just mocking their religion and their fake religiosity and all that kind of stuff. So they conspired. At the end of the day, they end up conspiring with one of his own disciples, Judas, to betray him. Um, Now, of course, Jesus knew it was coming. He knew it was coming, before he ever started his ministry. But the rest of us would not have known it was coming because it was something that had been done in secret. So they even conspired when he rose from the dead. There was a conspiracy plot with those same, Jews, to lie about what happened to the body, and to say that they came along and stole the body, which is pretty remarkable. Because when you think about this one, so the truth was, right, that Jesus rose from the dead. The conspiracy was that no, the disciples stole the body, but because the scribes and the Sanhedrin were the power, the conspiracy theory became that he rose from the dead, and the truth became that they stole the body. And I think that's really, really telling of how conspiracies end up working their way out in a culture, that the people in power, who are conspiring, end up making the truth become the conspiracy theory. I mean, that's a remarkable thing to just reflect on for a while.
Oh yeah,
When
and
you think
it
about it.
translates today with the mainstream news. They control the narrative, so whatever they want to be, quote unquote truth is the truth, and then everything else is labeled the conspiracy theory. When you were talking about the Pharisees and stuff, that's the first thought that popped into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, they controlled the narrative with the people. They were the power. They were the leadership. So who are you going to believe? You're going to believe those people, because why wouldn't you? Why would God put somebody in charge of us that was going to lie to us, or whatever?
And another thing too was, you talk about in the book how a lot of people want to go to the paradigm of, conspiracy theories are dangerous. They threaten the society, and then they point to the hyperbole of people that are, you know, mentally unbalanced, and how they just obsess over conspiracy theories and everything. Everyone's out to get them, and they try to make you out to be the loony. But I love how you point out, that it's just as dangerous to not consider these things.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if there really are conspiracies that are happening, and those conspiracies are meant to hurt people, and those conspiracies are not exposed. What does that do to a civilization? I mean, it seems to me that, in fact, there are passages that are used in, for example, Isaiah, where people will say, "See, this verse says, don't call anything a conspiracy theory." But actually, it means exactly the opposite of what they're saying, because what was going on was that the prophet came into the court of the king, and he was trying to convince the people to do what God said against the conspiracy of the king, who was trying to get them to break the law. So the prophet's job was to uncover the conspiracy, and he becomes the conspiracy theorist in the eyes of the king of Israel, usually. And this happened all the time to the prophets of Israel. So, yeah, I mean, when you don't entertain a conspiracy, when you have no ability, or it has become so demonized in the way that you think, to entertain conspiracy theory, and something is really going on that is horrible and means you harm, if you can't allow yourself to even entertain that idea, well, we're seeing the outcome of that on a massive global scale in the last 3 years, unfortunately.
And one thought that comes to my mind was that quote, evil prevails when good men do nothing.
Yeah, great quote.
Yeah. Uh, and I want to bring this up because as I was, thinking about this and taking some notes to talk to you today, uh, there's been a viral video just kind of burst out, and people are doing reaction videos. And there's this guy from Virginia that wrote this song, and it's just him with his dogs out in the field underneath a tree stand. And that thing is just resonating with so many people across the world right now. And it's kind of relevant to our subject matter. And as I've been looking, I cannot help but just one by one, I want to see all these reaction videos, because it's not just one set and one paradigm, because you have the mainstream media now saying that, oh, this is a right wing anthem, and this and that, trying to put their, labels on it and try to divide us once again. But the one thing that stood out to me was this thing was culture blind. It was culture blind. It was color blind. I mean, I was seeing Asians, I was seeing blacks and whites, and I mean, it didn't matter. Everybody
Yep.
was reacting to this video, and just a lot of them, just it brought them to tears, uh, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It. What was your thoughts and take on that video?
Yeah, I actually just watched. We didn't talk about this before the show either. I just saw that an hour ago. The reaction video where, what do they have, like 30 or 40 different people that are all doing reaction videos to his song, and then somebody put them all together into one place, which is pretty neat. And I mean, it actually brought me to tears. And when I first saw when I first heard that guy's song, um, I mean, I thought it was a good song or whatever, but I wasn't crying about it. But just to see these people react, and to see, he curses a couple times, and that really got people, because they're like, wow, this guy means what he's saying. And you think about it in a hip hop culture where it's fine to do that in your music or whatever, and you come along to us whiteys and we sanitize everything, and these guys are just hearing this visceral, gut wrenching honesty about what's happened with our economy. Our money's not worth anything. Everybody's lying to us. Everybody's, feeding off welfare, and they're fat as can be, and we don't care about it. And yeah, I thought it was remarkable to see that. And yeah, I mean, I guess I was aware that the media didn't like the song. I mean, what's new? Every time a Trump song goes number one, they have to somehow blast it or whatever. But it's funny because the harder that they push against this, and this is the power of the law. When you tell somebody, your little kid, don't put your hand in the cookie jar. Well, what does that make the kid want to do?
Right.
That's the power of the law. I mean, that's Paul in Romans 7. As soon as the command said not to covet, that's the very thing I wanted to do, was to start coveting. So the more these idiots fight against what's actually happening and the will of the people and what they're seeing, the worse it's getting for them.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, past trends, Jason Aldean, that song he just recently wrote, the mainstream media and everybody lashed out against him, tried to cancel him, and it's blew him up. And then back during the pandemic, you had the thing with Morgan Wallen. It's having like the exact opposite effect of what they're wanting. But one lyric that really stood out to me in that song was where he said and what we're talking about, if you're unfamiliar, guys, it's his name is Oliver Anthony, and it's called Rich Men North of Richmond. But in there he says, rich men north of Richmond, they all want total control. They want to know what you think. They want to know what you do. They don't think you know, but I know that you do. And I was just like, man, it gave me goosebumps. And I was like, yeah, man, we know Big Brother and what he's up to. And then he threw out the hat tip to the Jeffrey Epstein, and that drew me back.
Oh yeah.
And then the obese milk and welfare, and what he say? I love how he said it too, which I'm a Southern guy, so if you couldn't tell by my voice anyway. But he said, my taxes ought not paid for your bag of fudge rounds. I was like, yes. But yeah, when I heard that, and I was listening to the reaction videos and stuff today, and I was like, man, I'm going to bring that up to Doug, because that's kind of relevant to our whole conspiracy theory with the controlling of the narrative.
Yeah, completely. It's a great connection.
Yeah, so I didn't know if you had seen it yet. And I was like, I'm going to bring it up and ask him about it and see what he thinks about it. And, but like, I saw some conspiracies in the Bible, because like Gary Wayne, his book, the Genesis 6 conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, I was familiar with that and different little things. But one that really stood out to me was Absalom trying to overthrow his father's government. I mean, that was a really big conspiracy theory that stood out to me.
Yeah. So again, and it's so easy for us to say conspiracy theory. That wasn't a theory.
Oh,
that
yeah,
was
it happened. Yeah.
Conspiracy, right? So, yeah, I mean, and it broke David's heart because he loved his son so much, but his son tried to kill him, take the crown from him, and the whole deal, and ends up getting his just desserts at the end of it. To me, the place where conspiracies are found the most, probably are in the kings of Israel, which is interesting again, because these are the leaders, these are the rulers, the authorities, the powers of the nation, and where power and money and fame and all this stuff are. I think there's a little warning there that conspiracies can't be far away. I was talking with somebody, I don't know, yesterday, the day before, about this whole idea of how strange it is that evangelicals, in my world, the Reformed world, we supposedly believe it even more because of total depravity. But we sit here and we talk about how we believe in original sin, and everybody's born in sin, and everybody's fallen short of the glory of God. And we tell people that they sin at the pulpit, and they need to ask for God's forgiveness and repent of their sin, and blah, 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 blah. It's great truth. But then as soon as you turn around and talk about the government or the media or Hollywood or big pharma. It's like, no, they're incapable of doing anything to harm me. Or if they would, I mean, it couldn't possibly be very bad. It's like we suddenly all become Pelagians with our government that no, I just find that surreal.
I know
That,
it
and I don't know
makes
what
me
it is.
angry at
It's a
times.
cognitive dissonance. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, yeah, I trust your government. It worked great for the Indians. You know,
It's worked great for name any people that's ever lived. There was I found when I was writing the book a woman who did a scholarly work on conspiracy theories, and she was talking about how in early revolutionary life of America, just prior to the war, it was the free people that actually um, were the conspiracy theorists. And what a conspiracy theorist in those days meant was you are capable of reasoning and taking two different positions and coming to a conclusion about what's true uh, in the realm, especially of politics. If the founding fathers weren't conspiracy theorists, we never would have had a revolution. And you hear that term today and you go, well, so are you saying that the Revolutionary War was a bad thing? I'm not saying it either way. What I'm saying is that the people were free thinkers. They weren't slaves in their mind. They saw what the King of England was doing to them. They didn't close their eyes to it. And they said that we need to fight against this. Well, was that England's line? Was their line that, yeah, we're really evil people and we're trying to tax you colonists to death? And of course that wasn't their line. That wasn't the official narrative. So yeah, again, I mean, it name a nation with rulers in power that this hasn't happened to, and then tell me why it is that I'm not allowed to think that my government might just be doing something bad to me.
which I seen a meme. It was around July 4th. I remember it was just a few years ago, but it said, everybody was saying Happy 4th or Happy Birthday America, and this one said that had like a old school British, colonist with the red coat and all standing there, and it said, Happy birthday, you ungrateful surrectionists, or something like that.
Right,
That's
exactly.
how they seen us. And
Exactly.
and what kills me is like when you see the state that we're in, you know, inflation all time high, and then I guess that's one reason that Oliver Anthony song really just resonated with me so much. Is I'm a 9 to 5 factory worker guy with a family of three, 2 kids, and I remember the years of the Trump era. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying Trump, is the savior or nothing like that. I'm just saying, at that point in time, I was making less money than what I am now, but I was a lot more prosperous. My dollar went so much further. I had multiple properties. I had money in my pocket to go on vacations, to go out and take my family out to eat. And, if I wanted to go to McDonald's, $20 could get us all something to eat. And you're lucky to get yourself something to eat for $20. And
For 20 bucks, I know.
and it's so
Crazy.
crazy to me, like how much so many things can change and so drastically with one president in just a few years. And then
It's also, the way you started that off, I think is interesting too, because as soon as you mention Trump, it's like you feel like, well, I've got to explain I'm not worshiping him. Isn't that a strange
it
thing?
is. I mean,
That there
it's
has come
everywhere.
this conspiracy theory out there that anybody who speaks good about anything that Donald Trump did means that they're automatically worshiping him or in some sort of a cult. How bizarro is that? That's so not normal.
And it is, and it's just one of them things. It's you've seen people just, especially Christians, just attack other Christians for singing the praises of Trump. So you do. It's just kind of like a preemptive defensive wall you have to build as
Exactly.
protection. But it's just like what I was getting at though was just how bad things have gotten so fast. And then you have the January 6th event. People show up and they feel like they've been disenfranchised. They've had an election taken from them, and Then you have DC police on video, whether they were truly police or just dressed up like police, opening doors and motioning, everybody come on in, go this way, go to this door. And all of a sudden, oh, it was an insurrection. They went in there and tried to take over the government, and it's like, if that was the plan, they would have had, legit weapons. And it's just all this false flag narrative. But at the same time, it makes me angry because if I'm just being frank, when that happened, I was so upset. I felt like, my vote didn't count. The election was just stolen right out from under us. And, you just felt powerless. And when that happened, then they accused him of the insurrection. I'm like, our founding fathers, if they were to look back and see what's happening now, I mean, they would just be rolling over in their graves. These are the guys that totally, threw their government away and went to war over high taxation. Can you imagine what those people would have done if they were alive during 2020? They'd be ashamed of us.
It's incredible. I was I won't mention who this is. He's a guy that has been kind of one of these popular pastor mentors in my life for 25 years. Lives, breathes in my Reformed world, and I came across this article that he wrote on January 6th, and I think it's a good example of so many things. And I thought it would be good to read it since you brought this up, at least the beginning of it, and just think about. Let your mind go to what he's saying and what the implications of this are, in more than one way. He goes, one of the most unsettling images I can recall was from the January 6th, 2021 insurrection. So there's your word. A wooden cross propped up outside the U.S. Capitol, surrounded by a mob of people hosting up American flags, not far from a faux hangman's platform and noose apparently intended for the vice president. And what's interesting about that sentence is that this wooden cross propped up outside the Capitol actually took place at the Michigan Capitol, not at the DC Capitol. Anyway, and that's been fact checked, by USA Today or whatever. So the verse that comes to mind, and listen to what he does here from what he said. The verse that comes to mind is Romans 2:24, as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among Gentiles because of you. Peter similarly warned in 2 Peter 2:2 that many will follow their sensuality, and because of them, the way of truth will be blasphemed. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, which included insurrectionists praying Christian prayers once they infiltrated the Senate chamber, has prompted a renewed conversation about what's called Christian nationalism. And then he goes on to define Christian nationalism and say that it's this white privilege thing, but it's okay that African Americans appeal to the Christian narrative for social justice. It's like what in the world? So here you have this inability to even entertain the idea that January 6th might not be what you're being told by CNN that it is. An inability to go and look for yourself at all the videotape evidence that has come out in the last 2 years about that event. Not to mention just what happened live during the event. Were you watching it live?
Now, I didn't get to watch it live, but I caught snippets and stuff because I was working night shift at the time. But I remember just seeing all the videos on social media and stuff afterwards, and the cell phone footage.
So there were already rumblings that something was going to happen, and that at a very specific point in time, days before the event happened. So I was watching for this. I watched the whole thing live. And what Trump did something absolutely amazing. He made his speech go an extra hour longer than it was supposed to delay the people going over to the Capitol building, so that the timing of what took place would be ruined. And that's exactly what happened. They weren't able to get the insurrection that they thought they were going to be able to get because he delayed the timing of the whole thing. Not to mention that during the speech, he's sitting there saying, now we're going to go over there and we're going to march peacefully and we're going to walk and we're going to do what is in our constitution, and then afterwards he says the same thing. How can you get any more of a false flag than what happened on January 6th And yet you have all these Christian leaders doing this kind of stuff 2 years later. Justin, it just grieves my heart. I can't even tell you.
When you look back to the whole COVID-19 thing, the whole pandemic, and you had these same Christian pastors that were using verses in the Bible to obey your government, because God put them there, and we're shutting down our churches. This was a time that people were isolated, and depression was soaring, drug abuse was soaring. My wife, she does psychology and stuff for little children that are abused. It went up like 60% during this time. This was a tragic time. And if anybody ever needed to be in church and needed God, it was during this time. And they closed the doors, and there's so many pastors that just bent the knee, and then you seen what happened in Canada, that the police were rolling in and arresting these pastors and stuff for, breaking the ordinances and having church and stuff. It was just, it was a very spiritually dark time. Are you a member of the Prometheus Lens podcast members only group? And if not, what are you waiting for? Come join the band of brothers on the hero's journey. With this members only package, you get early access to episodes, you get special episodes that nobody else gets, special video content, documentaries, and you help support the show and keep the lights on. Doing podcasts, they can be very expensive. A lot of people don't realize all the subscriptions, the website fees, the video and audio subscriptions and things like that. So if you enjoy the content, help keep the lights on, help me keep doing what I love to do, keep bringing you fire each and every week.
Do you remember John MacArthur was one of the only big name pastors that actually stood up against it? Do you remember how so many of even his friends treated him for daring to stay open and say that risk people's lives and all this kind of stuff? And it turns out he's completely vindicated. Not a single apology from anybody anywhere.
And if you ever did get one, it would be like on the 8th or 10th page of the newspaper. They're so quick to crucify you or attempt to in front of millions, but then your exoneration is on the back page, if you get one at all. It's just sad. But one thing, getting back to your book with the conspiracy theories, once again, you blew my mind as I was listening to you talk about this, was the whole conspiracy of the genealogy.
Oh, yeah.
Could you get into that? Because me and you, because I remember last time we talked, I threw out the whole thing that I thought Jesus was Melchizedek, and then me and you started bouncing off each other, so this kind of falls in line with that. So once again, I was just like, man, Doug did it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really, really interesting one. So and we have evidence of this from the Dead Sea Scrolls, but in my opinion, Hebrews 6, when it goes into the Melchizedek thing, I think it goes into chapter 7 too. Hebrews has all this language of like he's without genealogy, without father or mother, without end of days. He's a priest forever, and several more things that Hebrews says. Well, we discovered at the Dead Sea Scrolls that there was a whole undercurrent belief that Melchizedek was essentially a divine figure, that he was not any kind of an ordinary king. And so my opinion, when we talked about the angel stuff, was that Melchizedek is the angel of the Lord. It's just kind of a title for him, the king of Salem, king of peace, king of righteousness, however you want to, put that. But so because this little part here is my opinion. All right. Because Hebrews is using that theology to talk about Christ, and then Christ, his priesthood is greater than the priesthood of Aaron because he's in this line of Melchizedek. And think about the title of that book. It's Hebrews. And what does that mean? It means that all these priests were becoming Christians. Okay. So the scribes, the Pharisees, these kind of people were becoming Christians. So people don't stop to ask this very much. We probably did talk about this on your Dig Bible with this too, but it's important for the background to the conspiracy. All right. There was a view in the first century that allowed a Jew to convert to a Trinitarian theology, whereas today it's very, very difficult because Jews are Unitarian today. In other words, they believe in one God, one person. So to come along and say that there's a Messiah who is also God, like there's no category for that with Unitarianism, but there is if you have Trinitarianism or Binitarianism, where you can consider that there are more than one person in a Godhead. So one God, but multiple persons. And we know for a fact, in fact, I published a couple of books from Puritans that knew about this 300 and 400 years ago, that the Jews had this theology from the Old Testament. And this is what John's gospel especially is writing to when he talks about in the beginning is the word is with God, and the word became flesh. Like that's not a Gnostic thing. It's an Old Testament thing.
Yeah, and just for context, I was going to throw this in there for the people that wasn't familiar with that episode or hasn't seen it yet. I believe what you're getting at was the two Yahwehs.
Yeah, two Yahwehs, two powers in heaven is what the rabbis called it. But like there's a verse in Genesis 19:24. It's the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So the background of that story is that three men come to Abraham. One of them is named Yahweh. Two of them are angels. Abraham sees them. He starts washing their feet. He holds a huge banquet for them. They eat with him. Yahweh stays there. This is the angel of the Lord, Yahweh, the Lord. And he's talking to Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah and destroying it. Meanwhile, the other two angels go to Sodom and Gomorrah and rescue Lot out of it. And when Lot gets out of the town, then suddenly the God who is talking to Abraham shows up in Sodom and Gomorrah. And there's this verse that says, the Lord rained down fire and brimstone from the Lord out of heaven. And so the rabbis, the Jewish rabbis said there's two Yahwehs in this passage, two Lords, one in heaven, one on earth. And so the church fathers love this verse because the one in heaven is the Father, the one on earth is the Son. Anyway, okay, so all these people are converting, all these Jews are converting, and the Jews are losing their grip and control over their religion. Sound familiar for conspiracies, right? Power, authority, rule. So they have to stop it. So what happened was, as they were translating, recopying their text and translating into Greek and stuff on their own basis after the Septuagint, they did some stuff to what seems are very insignificant passages. So, for example, Deuteronomy 32:8 has a little textual variant. The sons of God. God gave, the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance according to the number of the sons of God. Well, if you read the Hebrew, because the rabbis changed the original text, this is something Mike Heiser argued long time ago. They changed it to the sons of Israel. So sons of God, sons of Israel. What does that do? Well, sons of God are angelic beings, but sons of Israel are human beings. What does Jesus claim to be when he comes? He claims to be the Son of God. That's a divine title. If there are no divine beings called angels, called the sons of God, then guess what? Jesus as the Son of God is not a divine title, and Messiah is not divine. Okay, so they also did something with the genealogies after the Tower of Babel, where you have, these guys are living to be hundreds and hundreds of years old. So you read, and this will be in most of your English Bibles, because the English Bibles are using the Hebrew text in this case, usually. And you'll read that they lived to be 85 and had a kid and then died or whatever. Well, the Septuagint, the Greek translation that took place 200 years before Jesus was around on the earth in human form, add an extra 100 years to about 7 of those guys in the genealogy. This is the genealogy, I think, in Genesis 11, after the Tower of Babel. So that's 700-year difference. Now, why would that matter? First of all, how in the world do you account for the number 100 dropping out of 7 different verses? That has to be deliberate. But what could possibly be the motivation? Well, here was the motivation. Enter Melchizedek again. So Christians are claiming that Melchizedek is a divine figure, but Jews said no, he's Shem, the son of Noah. Well, if you have the extra 100 years, the 700 years, well, Shem dies like 500 years before Abraham's even born. So it's not possible for him to be Melchizedek. But if you subtract the 700 years, guess what? And you'll see this on almost any timeline you go and look up on Google of the patriarchs, you will see that Shem overlaps Abraham. And so the Jews will say that, look, Melchizedek is Shem, the son of Noah. Well, guess what that does to Melchizedek? Perfectly human, nothing to see here, move along.
Yep, desupernaturalizing the Bible once again.
Desupernaturalizing the Bible in really, really cunning, sinister ways that nobody in the world would even think twice about. But I found evidence that the church fathers knew full well what was going on, and they called the Jews out on it, on most of these things they were doing. And this, in part led, I think, to the increasing split in the earliest church between Jews and Christian Gentiles. It's as sad as that is, but I think that contributed to it for sure. So there was a conspiracy to tamper with the text because Jesus was getting all these followers to believe that he is God in human flesh that are Jews, and the Jews are losing their religion. So you have the motivation, you have the evidence that they did it. It's a conspiracy. And so I write a whole chapter of that in the book.
Yeah, they had to cancel Jesus. He was one of the original cancellations.
There you go.
Yeah, that was really good, man. I really really enjoyed that paradigm slap in the head that I got from listening to that one. And it just blows my mind too, because you go back to the Genesis 6. You have the same narrative and the same goals going on there. They tried to desupernaturalize the Bible and make the sons of God, the B'nai Ha Elohim, humans. And
right.
Or with our other podcast, I do with my friends, we call it the Dig Bible Podcast. We coined a phrase and put them on T-shirts. It says, Genesis 6, Sethite view, kissing cousins don't make 30-footers.
I think I saw that.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, we went to the Go Therefore conference, and Derek and Sharon and L.A. Marzulli was there,
right.
And a bunch of the guys that we had talked to. So we just printed shirts for everybody, and just done kind of random ones unless they asked us for a specific one. But Vicky Joy Anderson and Kenny C, they were both like, we want the Kissing Cousin shirt. So I got him that one, and I just give Noah was a conspiracy theorist, and then it started to rain to L.A.
Right.
And we was always, because I had a vendor table at that event, so we was all just kind of huddled up, and I was giving everybody their stuff, and everybody was looking at it and laughing. And L.A. looked over at Vicky's, and he laughed. He said, "Oh man," he said, "these shirts are awesome." He said, "I want to put these in my store." And I said, "Yeah, man, that'd be cool." And I said, "Well, man, if I know you'd have liked that one, I'd have got you that one instead of the Noah one." I said, "I didn't know if that was too extreme for you." He said, "No, that's right up my alley."
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I guess going back to like government conspiracies, and we talked about how the Pharisees back in those days were the power group, and they controlled the narrative, and anybody that strayed from their narrative was canceled and silenced, or in Jesus' case crucified. Today, our mainstream news and media, a lot of people don't realize it was many years ago, you had 40, 50, 60 all independent news organizations, and now you have basically one octopus with 4 or 5 limbs wrapping around all of them.
Yeah, it's very deliberate. It started, especially in mass in the late '90s under Clinton. He passed some sort of a law that allowed them to do this, but I forget what the companies are. I think Viacom might be one of them. I think Disney might be one of them. But they're umbrella companies that now basically own almost everything. Uh, and it's like you said, 3 or 4 companies. And when you get a room, if you had a room of 60 people in it, and you tried to control the flow of information, you could do it with probably really, really big, important events. If you could convince everybody that it was important for national security or something like that. But it's a lot easier if you only have 3 people in that room, and especially if you're all billionaires and have the same kind of an agenda. And people don't realize this. And there's a very powerful YouTube video that somebody put together. And I think I've seen more than one of these, but the one that's really great is it has, it starts off with just one local, like your Channel 9 local station or whatever, ABC station. And they say something like, they start introducing this whole idea of conspiracy theories and how conspiracy theories are dangerous to a civilization. But then the video multiplies to hundreds and hundreds of local stations, all saying word for word across the country the exact same thing about how dangerous conspiracy theories are. And it's like the most
biggest echo
incredible
chamber,
thing I've ever seen.
biggest echo
It's
chamber
great.
ever.
But I mean, it's about conspiracy theories. I mean, you couldn't get any more perfect of an analogy of how conspiracy theories actually work than what that guy did who made that.
And where that all stems from is, the CIA's operation that's been declassified now, Mockingbird.
Right.
Go into that for those that are not familiar with that.
Well, Mockingbird was, I forget what years that it started, but it was a CIA operation that took place where um, they co-opted, brought in, bribed, whatever you want to say. Uh, and these are just the official numbers, like 400 plus media people, where they told them what they were going to tell the people about, various things in going on in the world, especially in the 60s with JFK and Vietnam War and all these kinds of things. And but there's also another aspect to Mockingbird, which is that they also did the same thing in the big churches. So they actually came into the churches and infiltrated the pastors with their own people so that the churches would be towing the same line as the media. And I have access to one of the documents that they wrote that says that they did this. Then they say that they stopped Mockingbird, but yeah, they might have stopped Mockingbird, but they started something else that is 10,000 times the size of what that ever was.
And then too, when you look at all the CIA guys now that are retiring, Brenner and all these guys, they're all, working as what do you call it? What's the word for it? Like advisors for all these different news media outlets. So they're not covertly doing it; they're openly doing it now.
Right. You bring ex-CIA guys, military guys, women whose husbands work for the CIA, whatever you want. And then you just hire them as your talking heads for your news station or as color commentators or expert opinions or whatever. Like there's no such thing as conflict of interest going on there at all, right?
And when you just actually start, dipping your feet into the pool and start looking at some of this stuff, there's so many rabbit holes that you can go down, which I just want to kind of to go over like an umbrella blanket view, 30,000 foot view here. But I know I've talked to you in private. I want to talk to you in the future, like on more specific things and take deep dives on. But it's like all the different, false flag stuff. It's like, you talked about Pearl Harbor in your book and how we knew weeks ahead of time that we had cracked the Japanese code and knew that they were going to attack. and we just allowed it as an excuse to get into the war because the American people was dead set against going to war.
Exactly. So there's more than one way to do a false flag. Probably people don't know. A lot of people don't know the history of the term false flag. It actually comes from the world of pirating, where the pirates would put up a false flag on their ship, and then they would lure the unsuspecting other ship towards them, and then at the right at the perfect time they would surprise, we're actually pirates and we're here to plunder all your goods and kill you. So that's where the term originates, and it was being used back in the 1600s, the false flag idea. So that's carried over into today as a way of explaining operations that are being done by governments um, covertly, either against supposedly other governments for good reasons, reasons of national security. But the sad fact of the matter is that probably more times than not, these false flags are being perpetrated against their own citizens for ends usually of increasing their own power. I don't talk about 9/11 in the book, but it's not coincidental that the Patriot Act was passed a month or two right after um, September 11th happened, and that this most gigantic, largest power grab in the history of the government just so happened to be ready uh, on the desk of the president before September 11th ever happened.
Yeah, you got to have
And
the
then
solution ready
magically,
before you create the problem.
it's the solution, right? Yeah, I mean, you have your Hegelian dialectic right there on the table. Here's your thesis, here's your antithesis, and oh, here's our solution. Here's your solution right here. It's the Patriot Act. And I grieve every time I walk through an airport, every time I have to go to a sporting event and I have to go through the security. I don't just grieve, I get really ticked off, honestly. But I grieve for the kids, because now there's 20-year-old kids that have never known anything other than that. And it's a police state that was created because of a false flag perpetrated by our own government on our own people. It's disgusting.
And the thing is, too, is even if you want to hold to our government didn't do that, in the very least, you cannot deny, once again, like Pearl Harbor, that they had warnings and they knew about this in advance and did nothing in the very least.
I mean, people can deny whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the crazy things about it. But you can't rationally deny it. And I don't think you can rationally deny what happened in September 11th. That's actually how I opened the book, was just my own personal story of how I bought Bush's explanation of what happened, hook, line, and sinker. And I believed it for many years. And one day I was watching a local PBS station. This is back when PBS actually had a good thing every once in a while. And they had this 3-hour documentary on how 9/11 was an inside job. I couldn't believe what I was watching, but I thought, this is absolutely absurd. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. The power of having somebody that you trust in a position of authority and power over you, and then lie to you. It's incredibly hard for any human mind to overcome that cognitive dissonance, because we implicitly want to trust our leaders and we want to believe they have our best in mind for us. And this is why it takes really powerful psyops in order to get people out of their stupor, to actually see what's going on. They have to actually feel the implications of what the people are doing to them personally, which is what, go back to the song we were talking about earlier, right? Why is that song resonating with so many different people from all over the country, cultures, races? It doesn't matter who you are. It's because they're feeling
the
pain personally, right? If they didn't feel it, then they wouldn't care, and they would just write off. They would listen to to this psyop that the media has about this guy's song, and they would say he's a right-wing nut job, but they feel it. Because they feel it, they're willing to entertain what he's saying. And in their case, they're like, yeah, this is everything I've ever believed, but he's putting it into words for me.
And then you get into like, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Bill Cooper, William Cooper. I found some of his stuff on the internet, and then I stumbled across his book, Behold a Pale Horse, and got to reading that and his experiences and stuff with the government. But one thing that I found just, particularly wild was, everybody said he was a conspiracy theorist, crazy guy, and tinfoil hat wearing dude. But he said in the beginning of the book, he's like, for this information that I'm releasing, I will be killed for this. I will lose my life, but I don't care. And he talked about, just all kinds of stuff that was just mind blowing in there, And some people, say, what's that old saying? A dead clock is right twice a day. So when
Right.
people point to stuff that he said that's come true, they point out all kinds of other stuff that hasn't yet. But there's one story that really stood out to me because, and ultimately in the end, he was murdered on his front doorstep by a policeman on his own doorstep. And so they, in the very least, they made him out to be a prophet or fortune teller, just by their actions alone. But, with the UFO thing going on now, people that talked about Roswell and that being a UFO crash, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat, you're a crazy person. The government wouldn't lie to us. It's a weather balloon. And then now it's all over the news. We're recovering spacecraft. We're reverse engineering this technology. And a lot of people's getting upset, saying that we're not paying close enough attention to this, or we're not making a big enough deal about this. And in my opinion is it's because most of us already knew this all along. What's your thoughts like on the whole UFO phenomenon stuff going on right now?
Man, I have a lot of thoughts about it. So the UFO thing, first of all, I mean, I believe that the UFO phenomenon is a real phenomenon. And I believe that it's extraterrestrial in the sense that these creatures don't belong on the earth. And I have a biblical way of thinking about it because I believe in angels and demons. So that's the short of it. But I find the whole thing really interesting for a couple different reasons because it's kind of emblematic of what I think a culture that is steeped now in real conspiracies that people are finally starting to recognize are true, what it can end up doing to the public mind. It can fracture it. And so you end up having now something that never would have happened even a couple of years ago, where you've got two very strong competing ideas, but both of them are now conspiratorial. So one of them is, well, the government's all lying, and this is a psychological operation, and they're doing this for evil purposes, for whatever their reasons are, and there's no such thing as aliens. And then you have the exact opposite opinion, but it's also a psychological operation that's being done by, who knows, some mysterious group of people that they're finally going to, it's really kind of concerning in some ways. And I think one of the things we need to help people do is you cannot knee jerk into the world of conspiracy theories when everything around you comes crumbling down in your culture because of conspiracies. In other words, just because you grew up your entire life not believing in conspiracy theories, and now all of a sudden you're starting to see that, yeah, there's conspiracies everywhere.
Yeah, you're
You
hypersensitive.
can't just all of a sudden say that every single thing on the planet is a conspiracy theory. And that includes especially the realm of religion. I mean, this is kind of probably the most important thing I wanted to get across as just we've been talking together here, that that you have to have a bottom line of somebody who's going to tell you the truth. And for me, that bottom line is God, and it's his word. And I say this knowing that there's an entire group of people that are out there calling themselves Christians that are buying this lie that the church has hidden 80 different books from us, and that we're all in the Bible at one time. And we need to get back to that. I mean, it's pure Gnostic bullcrap is what it is. And it's historical revisionism, and people are buying it. And I think one of the reasons why is because they know there's conspiracy theories everywhere, and now they're not able to put the breaker on what's a conspiracy theory and what's not. And we have to be able to maintain our sanity and our reason and our logic and our trust, especially our trust in God, that he has given us every single thing that we need for faith and salvation and forgiveness of our sins. And he hasn't kept it hidden from us for 1800 years. That's not the way God operates. And we need to, as much as the institution of the church is full of sinful people who do bad things, and it's been infiltrated, I even said that earlier, we still have to trust that this is God's way of saving and sanctifying his people, and that we all need it. And that so you have to have some kind of thing in this world that you can trust. And if you can't trust God and what he's told you about his son, what in the world can you trust?
Yeah, and it comes down to Christ. We talked to Timothy Alvarino on the Dig Bible podcast a while back, and I loved this one thing he was saying. He was talking about the Hebrew roots movement. And he said,
that's another big one.
Yeah, we were talking about, how that's just tricking so many people and enslaving basically God's people and putting them back in the chains. And he said, and the problem is, he said, and believe me, he said, I love the fringe, because he don't like the word supernatural. He said, all these fringe topics.
Yeah, right.
He said, Genesis 6, he said, Deuteronomy 32, aliens and angels and demons. And he said, all these fascinating topics, giants, he said, I'll talk about them ad nauseum. He said, but the problem is, because the initial question was, my buddy Stephen asked him, how important do you think it is for people to dig into the Bible? And he says, it's important, but only important in so much that you know the story of Christ. He said, you got to have a firm foundation. He said, be able to defend your faith, be able to defend the historicity of Christ and why you believe what you believe. He said, and stay in the New Testament. He said, and once you have that foundation, then you can go digging into the Old Testament and then looking at the giants and the fallen angels and all these other fringe topics that everybody's floating to. He said, and this Hebrew roots movement is attacking those people that don't have the firm foundation and they're built on the sand. He said they're new Christians and they're diving straight into this weird stuff. He said, so then when this false information and this trickery from Hebrew roots comes in, he said, they believe it because they don't have that foundation. And he ended it, with this great little closing quote. He said, so take away Nephilim from me, take away fallen angels, giants. He said, take it all off the table. He said, and if I'm only left with the story of Christ, I'm perfectly content.
Absolutely. Amen. It's Christ alone. That was one of the main calls of the Reformation. And that, they had a different context for it. Catholic Church overthrowing things that he would say or whatever, tradition. No, it's Christ alone. But in this case, it's just equally as applicable. I am 100% in agreement. Throw out any giant conspiracy stuff I've ever written, but keep the angel of the Lord and keep the Christ stuff that I've written, because if you don't have him, then you don't have salvation. You are dead in your sins and you're going to hell. Or, as Paul said, God's a liar. in which case, um, you know, you're floating around with no hope in this world.
Yeah, amen. Well, Doug, I ain't going to keep you too much longer, man. I appreciate your time, and we covered a lot of ground. But let everybody know about your new project that you've told some of us about on Facebook, and where they can find your work and website, and give everybody a plug where they can find your stuff.
Well, I've been preaching through the book of Luke in our church. Anybody can go listen to those sermons, any sermons we've ever done at our church website, RBCNC. So the initials of Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado, rbcnc.com. Those are all there available for free. You can check out what kind of a church we're like and just see, since we've been talking about church. But I bring that up because Dr. Judd Burton and I are working on a book on this Serpent Mound in Israel, and I'm kind of using that as a way to tell the Sons of God part of the story that I kind of left on the table with the giant book. I focused on the giants in that book. This one's going to focus more on the devil and who he is, and but using this crazy feature that's in the middle of the Golan Heights in Israel to do it. So it's kind of fun, and but that's still a ways out before we get that finished. But conspiracy theory book, giant book, Galatians book, normal things like baptism or the creeds of the church, or what else have I written on the five solas of the Reformation. So I got the fringe, I got the foundation, and trying to add more to both those sides all the time. And those are all can be found. You can go to my website, douglasvandorn.com, or you can just go to Amazon if you're interested in any of those books.
Oh, and for those that are interested, in astronomy and revelations and things like that, Doug does an amazing job. When you go to his church's website, I definitely recommend you check out his series on Revelation and how I've never heard anybody just break it down like he does. And he goes into the significance of, the astronomy of the Bible. And even, I'll give you some teasers here, how the seven churches of Revelation lined up to, the seven sisters and all these constellations and stuff. It's pretty cool. I love how you just deep dive and the routes that you go. I love your teaching style, Doug. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, man. That's nice of you.
Well, guys, thank you for signing in, checking us out, and don't be afraid to put on your tinfoil hat every once in a while. It's healthy.